Hi, everyone, and welcome to Explorations in Painting Techniques. My name's Paul Richmond, and this is my friend Melissa.
Hi, everybody.
Introduce yourself, Melissa. Who are you?
Hi, everybody. My name is Melissa Foreman. I am an artist and art director and lover of all things creative. And Paul and I are collaborating on this project called Art Makes Us. And our goal with this is just create a community, a safe place for artists to come and be creative, just make stuff. So we love meeting and teaching and exploring new techniques with all of you.
Absolutely. And this class is extra fun because it is all about the idea that every artist has their own way of doing things. And it's very easy, I think, sometimes when you take a painting class or an art class from somebody, you can feel like you want to sort of mimic what the instructor is doing and follow their style and do things their way. And so we came up with the idea for this class because Melissa and I are very different artists, wouldn't you say?
A little bit.
Dad. Melissa is very detailed in her work, very detail oriented. She uses like the tiniest brush you could ever imagine and paints all the details. And then I'm the total opposite. I like to just kind of explode on the canvas, use a palette knife, throw paint around, make a big mess. So
Mhm.
wherever your style lands in that spectrum, if it's on one end or the other or somewhere in the middle, this is a class where you get to explore that. You can sort of pick up tips from what both of us are doing, but also please feel free to venture off in your own direction too and try whatever you want.
Yep. I think part of the art journey is just figuring out what works for you. And Paul and I wanted to create a space where you can decide what tips to take from either one of us. Maybe no tips to take from either one of us. Maybe do your own thing. That's okay. It's just time set aside for you to be creative and paint and make something you're happy with.
Yeah, this is a very chill class. Melissa and I you'll be seeing both of us painting and we'll be talking about what we're doing, but we'll also just sort of be chit-chatting. And sometimes that's honestly the best way to distract your brain when you're working on a piece, to just be engaged in a conversation or listen to a conversation about something that has nothing to do with what you're working on. So we will do our part to distract you today too. So today's class is all about painting light.
Mhm.
What do you think about painting light, Melissa? What comes to mind for you?
Well, I think when we were trying to figure out what we were going to paint for this class, we were like, what does this mean? I need
Right.
to go, but what were we thinking about? And the more I thought about it, the more I thought there is a lot to think about when you're capturing light in a painting. There's so many different aspects of it. There's, the direct lighting, how it affects the subject, and then also the reflected light,
Mhm.
reflections themselves, the
Yeah.
way color changes, the way mood changes when light hits a subject, depending on what the lighting is like. And you have to think about all of those things when you're creating a painting, and you kind of handle it differently depending on what you want to achieve and how you want it to look.
Yeah, definitely. So we picked a reference for today that has all of those things in it. It's the probably quintessential reference for a painting about light. It's a photo of the northern lights, and
Mhm.
there's reflections of the lights in the water. Melissa, you are working in acrylic, right?
Yes, I am going to use acrylic. I have a lot of Liquitex paint that I'm going to be painting with, and I'm going to be painting on a canvas.
Okay. And I am doing oil. I'm also painting on a canvas. I'm working on a pretty large canvas. I think Melissa's is pretty small and will be very detailed, and mine will be big and messy and crazy. So
Yeah.
you'll get to see two extremely different approaches.
Mhm.
Anything else we need to say before we get started?
I don't think so. You're welcome to grab whatever paint you want, whatever surface you want to work on, and get to it.
Let's go. Wow, Melissa, this is like the biggest canvas I've done in this class before. What was I thinking?
No, you're being very ambitious. I don't know what you're thinking.
I never know what I'm thinking.
I think you're probably thinking, this is the canvas I have, so this is the canvas.
Possibly.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna start by just getting some color on there.
Yes. And I started by doing a quick sketch, and what I like to do is just outline where the color shifts. So I'm not always outlining the objects, although, sometimes that is where the color shifting. But
Mhm.
I tend to map out where the color changes, and that's just kind of like a little paint by number map for me to use as I start painting.
Mhm.
It might change as I go along, but it's just a place to start. So I have a sketch that I already did, and now I am mixing my colors.
And I sort of do that, but with paint. I just kind of sketch it out as I go with the paint.
And obviously, lots of blues, some yellows in here, some greens. So I'm just gonna put the colors down that I know I'm gonna need, and then I can always mix more as I go. I need a few earth tones in here.
I like to get the whole canvas wet. So I do a base coat that's pretty thin, and then I'll go back on top of that with thicker paint with the palette knife and start making things really pop out. But so for right now, you see me painting pretty thin, and with oil, in order to thin it, you have to have some kind of medium. So I use Liquin, which just comes in a jar. You can get it in different thicknesses. There's Liquin Original, which is a little bit thicker. That's what I use. And then Liquin Fine Detail, that's thinner. It works better if you're painting, like with more detail, more control. Um, you can
Then
use other things too. What do you use to thin your paint when you do oil paintings?
when I do oil, I usually use a Turpenoid.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
Do you
I
mix
do
it with
I
anything
use
or just
liquid.
use it straight?
What's that?
Do you mix it with anything or just use it straight?
Sometimes I'll just use it straight. I'll just use the Turpenoid and mix it with a little bit of the whatever color I'm using. If I want to do like a wash, an oil
Yeah.
wash, or a glaze, sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will use liquid
Yeah.
sometimes, especially if I want to speed up the drying process.
Yeah. Liquid is great for that.
Yeah, for sure. If I'm under a deadline, liquid.
The liquid's coming out.
Yep,
Yep.
for sure. It is a lifesaver at times.
And as thick as I paint, if I didn't use liquid, I feel like it would take 2 years to
Oh my
dry.
gosh. Yes, definitely.
So I'm just kind of like brushing in where I see some of those green swirls. When you work big, it's really important to keep kind of backing away and making sure that things are looking like they're ending up about where they're supposed to. Well, that's true for whatever size you work, actually.
Yeah, just a little harder when it's so big.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Paul talked about doing a wash of color over his whole canvas, and he always likes to start that way. And sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But for this one, since it is so dark, I am going to do a wash of blue over the whole thing. So I'm just going to add a little bit of water to my paint. Mix
One
it up.
other thing that you will notice is that Melissa and I are both using canvases that are different proportions than each other, but also different proportions than the photo.
Mhm.
So when you are making a painting, you get to decide what you want the composition to be. You don't always have to paint everything that's in the photo. You can choose to crop in, pick out just the part that interests you. And that's exactly what I did in this case. I wanted to emphasize the sky, so I wanted to turn the canvas vertically to do that.
All right. So I just mixed up a watered down blue. This was just straight uh, primary blue. And just add a little bit of water to it. So I'm just going to paint this over my whole canvas to get started here. And this is thin enough. It shouldn't cover up all of my pencil lines. I should still be able to see anything I drew underneath the paint. but it should do.
That's always sad when you make a great drawing and then
I know, like, oh my gosh, what did I just do?
wipe it off.
Yeah, there it goes.
I try to draw, and when I say draw, I mean I'm drawing with the brush, but I try to draw just enough to where I can sort of have a sense of where all the things are, but I don't like to get too detailed. I prefer to work that out with the layers of paint. And anything that I do draw is likely to get totally covered up quickly. So that's why I don't get too invested in that part. I would definitely encourage you, if you are cropping um, to just a portion of the photo reference, to open up the photo in some sort of a program or an app where you can crop it to match the proportions of your canvas. Because if you don't, then it gets really challenging to get the composition laid out, I think.
Yeah, I think it's easy to get lost in what you are intending to paint.
Yes. And plus, when your reference matches the proportions, then you can do things like kind of imagine where the halfway point is on the sides or on the top, and almost kind of create like a imaginary grid for yourself to help you start placing things. Like I would kind of imagine where the halfway point is here, and I saw that the mountains, the way I have it cropped, are below that quite a bit still. So that helped me get my horizon placed where I want it.
Yeah, I think that's probably the most important part when you're starting a landscape like this is get that horizon line
Yeah.
in there. And it doesn't have to be in the same place that it is in the photo. I mean, Paul and I talked about you can change that if you want, but you just want to make sure you establish that and then work everything else around that. So
Mm-hmm.
kind
Yeah,
of the
the
most
horizon
important
is
thing.
the basis for any kind of like perspective in your piece. Everything kind of recedes back to the horizon. And then, of course, the sky, it's the starting point for the sky. So it's really helpful.
Mhm. I just have my thin wash of blue and I'm just going to wipe it down a little bit so it dries faster.
Is this a race, Melissa, to see who can finish first?
Oh my gosh, Paul, I think you already won.
I thought that maybe you would have a better shot today,
Really?
well, considering the
Well,
size of this.
considering yours is what, 3 times bigger than mine?
Of course, I'm using a massive brush.
Well, I don't know. I think you're still gonna win. You always win.
I do like winning.
Right. Okay. So I'm gonna put my blue wash aside. Now the colors are mixed. Give this a minute to dry.
What actually causes the northern lights?
Oh my goodness.
I have no idea.
I don't know. I'll have to look it up. I'm sure I knew at one time, but of course now, as you ask me, I have no idea.
I'll just assume it's magic.
Okay. We'll go with that.
I think that's a safe bet. I think in both of our cases here, what you see Melissa doing and what you see me doing, we're each kind of taking our own way of doing it, but the goal is to just get everything mapped out on the canvas so that you can feel good about the placement of things and then go further into detail once you are kind of confident that stuff is where it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If you're constantly having to correct drawing issues once you've already gotten detailed on the canvas, it's just torture.
Yeah,
So,
that just makes it harder. The rule is always if you have a good drawing, you'll have a good painting, and I don't know if that's always the case, but it is
Yeah,
a
I
good.
I could probably prove that one wrong.
Yeah, right.
Sounds like a challenge.
It does make it easier if you have a good start and you know things are in the right place when you go to get started as far as the paint goes. It'll be easier along the way.
Definitely.
Make a map for yourself.
That's basically what the drawing is.
Yeah,
And it only has to make sense to you. So if
right.
you draw, more geometric shapes or kind of weird shapes, but it's like a shorthand that helps you get the stuff on there in a way that makes sense, that's fine.
Hmm. Yeah. So I'm just starting to lay in some color on the sky here.
That's exciting.
Started with my darkest dark in that upper left hand corner because you do see a lot of almost black up there. So I
Hmm.
mixed in black and blue, just to add a little bit of color in there so it's not pure black. And then I'm just taking my darker bluish green that I mixed. So I just mixed a little bit of the blue, added a little bit of yellow and a little bit of the black. And now I'm just blending that in to the darkest blackish blue color.
So with acrylic, you can blend as long as the colors are wet. So it's good to get those transitions figured out.
Mm-hmm.
With oil, you have a little more leeway because it'll stay wet longer.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I think with acrylic, it's good to have some color mixed before you start painting.
Hmm.
That way you can just start blending right away. Just grab your next color and go instead of waiting for that color to be mixed, which will cause your paint to dry
Yeah.
time to be on the canvas. And then once you start looking at the sky, there are a lot of colors in there.
Hmm.
It's easy to say, oh, it's just a blue sky, a dark blue sky, but there's some green in there. Obviously, once you get closer to the northern lights, there's a lot of yellow. So you're
Yeah.
going to have a lot of color shifting.
Yeah. There's a lot to think about with color because you have to think about the value of it, the how light or dark it is, but then you also have to think about um, like the temperature of the color. Is it more cool? Is it more warm? Is
Mhm.
it more saturated? Like, is it a really bright color, or is it more neutral? Um, so usually I like to simplify it a bit when I'm starting and just try to get something that feels in the ballpark and then refine as I go.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, the nice thing about acrylic is it actually looks better as you layer more colors. So
Yeah, same with oil.
a lot of it, just think of it as a base coat, and you can always go back in and change it and shift the colors later if you need to. And it's not that big a deal,
Plus, it
actually.
means the pressure is kind of off. Like,
Right.
if you paint something and it looks hideous, you can just think, well, that's just the base coat. Just wait.
Right.
It's going to be gorgeous.
Hmm. Just get something on there
Yeah.
and it'll be okay. Usually, when I'm painting a landscape, I'll do horizontal strokes just because oftentimes that's the way things fall. Like if you think about the clouds in the sky, usually they have some kind of horizontal shape to them.
Hmm.
So you
I'm
want to
doing
kind
the exact opposite of that, which is true to form.
of
all of my
perfect,
all of my brush strokes are vertical right now.
interesting. I mean, you do get a lot of vertical shapes once you get closer to the northern lights. A lot of them stretch vertically. So
Yeah.
you will have definitely some, if you're blending, you'll have some blending going vertically instead of horizontally.
Yeah, there's a lot of those like streaks, those kind of rays of light where it goes from one
Mhm.
section to the other. This is fun.
Hmm. Do you think it helps a lot to have that base coat because acrylic can get really transparent? You'll end up seeing through it, and then you
Hmm.
have to do layer after layer to get the color as dark as you want.
Yes.
So I would recommend with doing some kind of base coat, and obviously it doesn't have to be blue; it can be whatever you want it to be.
Yeah, sometimes it's fun to do a base coat in a totally different color than what you
Hmm.
plan to have it end up being. I'm using a cooler blue up in the dark part, like an ultramarine, and then as it gets down closer to the northern lights, I'm switching to cerulean blue, which is warmer. Kind of makes that transition work a little better, I think.
So I'm just trying to get a lot of the blues and greens and darker colors into the sky here, and then I'll start adding in some lighter colors for the northern lights. Just when I can get that dark color established, because I will have to go over it a few times, I think.
You might finish this in our class today, huh?
I don't know, Paul. Let's not be too optimistic here.
That's my job is to be too optimistic.
It is. It's true.
I always think everything is going to take less time than it does.
That is also true. Paul is a very fast painter. I am not a very fast painter.
And that's, a very good thing to point out because I've had a lot of students that say to me they feel like, they're not um they're not fast enough for how they need to be in order to be an artist, a professional artist. And I'm like, well, there's no speed requirement. Some artists spend a long time, and that's okay. It just depends on your style and what you want the painting to be.
Yeah, I would work at the pace that works for you.
Yeah, for me, I have found that my paintings are better when I'm fast. There's just like a loose, kind of fresh energy that comes. And if I spend too long on a painting, it looks flavored and it just doesn't feel like me. So
Mhm.
it's actually just finding what is your style, what is the look that you want.
Yeah.
And that's a really exciting thing, I think, as artists, when you realize that you have that freedom to find your own style and to be, the kind of artist you want to be, it really opens up the possibilities.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's hard to not compare yourself to other people, but it really is important to get to that point where you kind of find what works for you and let other people do what works for them. I mean, I think Paul and I are both at a point where we've found what works for us
Yeah.
after all these years, and it's just a little silly to try anything outside of that.
Right. Yeah, unless you just want to. I mean, you can always
Let's just want to experiment.
like a week or two ago when I got to make you paint with the palette knife and you were tortured.
Yeah.
That was
Pretty much, yeah.
fun. It's fun to try things, but yeah, you don't have to be like anybody else.
Mhm.
Now, that said, one good way of figuring out what you might want your style to be like is to pay attention to the kind of art that you are drawn to or what when you're just, scrolling online, or when you go to an art gallery or something, what are the pieces that really catch your eye and make you think, "Ooh, I want to do that." Because
Mhm.
sometimes when you're starting out, you don't really know what you want your style to be. And I remember when I was trying to do very realistic paintings, I did that for a little while. And then I started looking at the art that I loved, and it was all this, much more expressive brushstrokes, palette knife, crazy colors. And I
Mhm.
thought, well, why am I painting this way if the art that I like looks totally different?
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I think there was a time in art school where, I felt like I had to be a certain type of illustrator because that was my major. I was an illustration major, and I
Same
felt
here.
like I needed to have a certain look, or I need to have a certain way of doing things to fit into that industry, or just fit with the other
Yeah.
school, or what the instructors told me to do, and it just didn't work for me.
hmm
I made it work as well as I could at the time, but then I think after I graduated, I just thought this isn't really who I am.
Yeah.
And you don't know when you're in college, you try a bunch of things, but I ended up going back to how I work naturally, and how
Yeah.
I always did things. And I think straying from that was a good experiment in kind of figuring out where I needed to be, but I think I knew all along who I was as an artist, and kind of got away from it for a while.
Yeah.
It's okay.
And
Yeah.
it does get tricky when you are doing something where, if you want art to be your source of income,
Mhm.
especially if you're doing commercial art like illustration or something, there is a factor that where you want to maybe look at what is trendy or what is going to work
Yep.
in the market and stuff like that. But even still, even in that realm, I think you still have to be authentic and find you know,
Mhm.
what is your way.
Yeah.
You just try to chase what is trendy. Um, it's not gonna it's not gonna feel authentic unless you really love that.
Mhm.
That was definitely something I had to learn. I thought like I have to paint the way that I see all of these popular people painting.
Yeah.
But, like that was not me.
Right. Yeah.
We had all those teachers at that time who were like still kind of into the, I don't know, I would call it like the Norman Rockwell era of
Mhm.
illustration.
Mhm.
So they kind of were pushing, a modified version of that with more stylized characters and stuff. And
Yeah.
it was just not what spoke to me at all.
Well, and I think it's okay as an artist to want to try a lot of different things too. Like I'm somebody I get bored if I do the same thing over and over.
Yes. Melissa's video, sadly, is going to cut out. She had some technical issues. Just going to see me, but you'll still hear our conversation. Unfortunately, you won't get to see everything she is painting, but you can still kind of follow along with her process and her thinking.
Just imagine it's beautiful.
It's gorgeous.
I think it's okay to experiment,
hmm
but
I would
also
love
be okay
to.
with who you are naturally and the way you do things. The best thing is if you can find a way to do what comes naturally to you, and be happy with it.
Yeah. I know for me too, like even after I sort of felt like I found my style, then I felt like I was kind of boxed into doing a certain subject matter. Like I painted mostly figures, and that's what people kind of expected from me. And then I realized I kind of want to paint other things too sometimes, like a landscape or like whatever. And
Mhm.
so I just started doing that, and it was really fun, and people respond to that too. So I think, once you kind of find your style, it's fun to stretch yourself and see, no matter what I paint, it looks like a Paul Richmond painting because it is.
Mhm.
I'm just kind of blocking in some of the shapes on these mountains now, and I'm being very loose about it, but I'm trying to give a sense of the layering so I can go back in with the palette knife in a bit and kind of carve that all out more.
Wow, you moved on to mountains already? I am still on sky.
But your sky is gorgeous.
Well, it's getting there. I like all these greens and blues and the subtle shift in color. It's kind of fun.
It's a beautiful color palette.
Hmm.
There's different things that can draw you to wanting to paint something. Sometimes it's what it is, if you have some sort of connection to that. Sometimes it might just be the colors or textures or whatever.
I don't think I've ever painted the Northern Lights before, but I would love to see the Northern Lights
Yeah, me too.
someday.
All right, field trip.
Field trip. We talked about going to Iceland at some point.
I know
So
we did. We can make a video of us standing there painting this again.
I assume you can see the Northern Lights from Iceland. I don't even know.
We don't even know what causes them. This is not
No,
an educational video
no.
in that regard.
If anyone knows, please educate us.
Yes, clearly we're clueless. All right. So now I am doing some of the reflections of the green in the water. Whenever you paint water, in nature like this, it's always going to reflect the colors from the sky or the colors that are around it. Such a bright green in some of these spots. It's
It
so
is
cool.
very bright. Yes, I had trouble mixing it. I'm like, wow,
Mhm. Yeah,
I don't know.
yeah. I had a very light green. It's called permanent green light that worked pretty well for
Oh,
it.
okay.
I added a little bit of white, a little bit of yellow in some parts. But that's an interesting thing too when you're thinking about color. You see something that's green and you're like, okay, well that's green, but but what green? There's so many different greens.
Yeah, I think one trick to painting light too is to um, paint something bright, but surround it by other things that are dark, and then you
Yes.
want like a subtle glow around it. So that is going to make it look like it is glowing, and I think that's one of the coolest things about painting light is just getting those colors right. And once you get it right, it's almost like the painting itself is illuminated.
Yeah. Yeah. You can't always match exactly how light or how bright a certain color looks. You're sort of limited by the paints you're using and what you're able to mix, but you can compensate for it by going a little darker with the darks or changing what's around it. And um, I think that is something that is confusing for people when they're starting out. If you think I'm painting light, you're not necessarily like in the mindset of looking for and thinking about where the darks go because you're focusing on the lights. But like Melissa said, the darks are just as important. You can't have that feeling of light without the shadow.
Yep, it's true. You're definitely going to need to get that established. And then once you add that pop of white or white with slight yellow tinge to it or whatever temperature your light is, you want to have dark surrounding that. And then a subtle glow will help too.
Yeah.
And that's just softly blending that color into that background.
Everything is relative.
Mhm. So I've just, I've mapped out my sky where all my colors go. I have my northern lights set in here with a slightly darker color. And then I'm going to go in on top and slowly add highlights until I get it as bright as I want it. And the reason I did that because it'll help add that glow behind it if I have a slightly darker color, and then I work up towards that highlight.
That's one of the big advantages, I think, of working in an opaque medium like acrylic or oil. You can just put something down. It doesn't have to be exactly right. And then just keep inching your way toward the color that you need it to be.
Hmm. Yeah, so that's a little trickier if you're working in watercolor.
You have to start from light and kind of inch your way to dark. That's the best way to do it.
Yeah,
If you're doing watercolors.
yeah, it's kind of a backwards process.
Yeah, because with watercolor, you're really not supposed to. And I hate rules in art. I mean, you can do whatever you want, but you're not supposed to use white. You're supposed, in order to make it have that watercolory, luminous look. It's all about using the white of the paper to create the highlights.
Mhm.
I'm so heavy-handed that is challenging for me. As you can imagine from looking at what I've got going here.
All right, I am going to let my sky dry a little bit. And I'm just going to put some color in for these mountains. It's just going to be a similar approach to what I used for the sky.
That's exciting.
Yeah, it's moving on to mountains. Can you believe it?
Look at you go.
Gotten this far.
You are going to finish this thing.
Well,
I
let's not push it.
have faith.
Okay. Let's see what happens here. I really like using these flat brushes, especially
Mhm.
for landscapes, because I feel like you can make a lot of different types of lines. Like you can use the edge of it, like I'm using now, to make a brush stroke that's more of a line. You can use the flat side of it to cover a lot of area quickly.
Mhm.
You can use it to make texture. I think these are good ones to have if you're doing a lot of landscapes for sure. Also, if you want to cover a lot of area quickly, so like doing a wash or anything like that, they're really useful.
I like the flat brushes too. Flat brushes, slant brushes, anything that has a straight edge.
Hmm. I like putting in a lot of my darks first. It just kind of helps establish the lighting
Mhm.
as I get these mountains mapped out. I'm just putting in the darks first.
Remember, whatever you're doing, whatever style or whatever approach you're taking, to keep looking at that reference image.
Mhm.
Even if you are, really going in an abstract direction, it can still help you kind of think about what it is you want to exaggerate or how you want the brush strokes to go. that might kind of make help to create more of a sense of the different planes of the part you're painting or more depth or whatever. Um, just keep looking at that photo as you go for inspiration.
Yeah, I think sometimes I look at the photo more than I look at my painting.
Me too, and I feel like that's the one thing that people when they're first starting out painting, they can get a little overwhelmed with just trying to, figure out how where to put the brush and how to make the paint move and kind of forget that the reference is there. So
Mhm,
you should be looking at it at least as much as you're looking at the painting, if not more.
mhm.
I like to have it up on a computer screen that's right next to my canvas. And when I'm starting out, like I am right now, I just keep it zoomed out so that I don't really even see the details. And
Mhm.
then once I get this base coat on there, then I'll zoom into different areas and try to bring out more of what I see. But that's one way that I keep myself from getting too like focused on details too early, which is
Yeah.
so tempting. I bet even more for you.
Yep, that's exactly what I do too. I like to have it on my iPad as I'm painting, and I think it's really helpful. Like you said, it's easier to keep it zoomed out at first, and then you can kind of block in the colors, put
Hmm.
things where you think they need to be, and then zoom in later as you need
Yeah.
it. It is really helpful to just have it in front of you at all times. If you want to print it out, you can do that too.
Uh-huh.
Just to work that way as well.
I'm kind of covering up most of the bridge because I want to just be able to go in and kind of plop in the little lights
Mhm.
and not have to paint around them to add the dark back.
I think another thing that's helpful in the beginning, if you want to avoid getting too detailed, is use a big brush.
I can attest to that.
Paul's got the biggest. He wins.
Everything's a competition. When you're painting the water, or when you're painting anything really, I really try hard not to get too consumed with thinking about what it is. And I just look at the shapes and the colors. And if you can do that and not get hung up thinking I'm painting a mountain or I'm painting a bridge or a reflection, when you start labeling it, then it's easy to say to yourself, well, I don't know how to paint reflections. I don't know how to paint bridges. But if you just look at it as shapes and colors, well, you know how to paint those.
Yep. Yep. You can almost look at it more as an abstract
Yeah,
piece. It, whatever individual part you're looking at.
yes. That helps me a lot.
Mhm. And again, I like my brush strokes to go in the direction of whatever I'm painting. So a lot of these reflections, they actually the brush strokes would go up because they blend up. But if you're working in the mountains, a lot of those go down the side of the mountain. It's more of
Hmm.
an angled stroke. So use your brush to help make it easier for you.
You almost like want to think of it like you are sculpting the different parts, and how would your hand have to move along the edge of the whatever you're painting if you were making it three-dimensional. If you use your brush or your palette knife or whatever you're using that way, um, you get more of a sense of volume and depth.
Mhm.
Okay, I have just about got my canvas covered. Getting close.
Darks in there. I'm gonna go back in with some of my more medium tones.
I'm going to hold off on doing the bridge for now because I want to get the mountain laid in first. The way that I paint with the palette knife, it helps me a lot to think about layering, what's in front of what, how do I where do I want the most elevated parts to be, and so I'll try to get everything around those areas done first, and then I can go in and do the final touches with the most thickness. So it's good to have a strategy, even if you change your mind.
Especially as I'm putting all these colors on here now, I'm just thinking of this as a base coat. So this is all
Same here.
to get me started, headed in the right direction. So give me something to work on top of.
Yeah. And that takes the pressure off because it's very low commitment level. You don't like it yet, that's okay. You just think, well, this is just my base coat, so who cares?
Yep.
If I've got my canvas covered, I'm going to clean myself off a little bit, have a
Feeling a
drink,
little messy over there?
just a smidge. You know me.
Mm-hmm.
I
You love your messes.
do. All right, now I want to have some fun with this thing. Not that we haven't been having fun so far, but to me, obviously, the most important part of this is the light in the sky. And so I want to start there with my palette knife and see if I can really emphasize that and get some of that movement happening up there.
Mhm.
And this is where it's going to start to become very abstract. In fact, I would say that right now, my painting probably looks more realistic than it will when it's finished because I just sort of have it all laid out with a brush right now and everything's kind of smooth and not like realistic in Melissa's standards, but like
Yeah. Well,
me.
mine is definitely not realistic at this point.
Mine's only going to get crazier from here, so get ready.
We are ready. Lay it on us, Paul.
Oh, I am so doing this. Mixing up a really light yellow green.
I am excited to paint that part of the sky.
Oh yeah.
That is the fun part.
I have to mix big piles especially on a big canvas like this.
Actually, you know what the most fun part of this painting will be is the stars, when you can just splatter white on top of
Oh,
it.
I know, I can't wait.
That is the fun part.
That's probably one part that we'll both do the same way.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I've got a huge pile of light green. So I like to just load up my palette knife and start carving it in. I'm going to zoom in a little on my reference here so I can see what's happening. All right. For me, the palette knife part is really about letting go of control.
Of reality.
Letting go of reality too. I don't have a hard time with that.
No, that's your specialty.
Yeah, reality is so boring. But I like to just cake it on there like I'm decorating a cake almost.
Hmm. Which makes it sound so much more fun
Yeah.
and delicious. I'm really just abstractly laying color in here, and this will just kind of give me a map as I keep painting and something to build on.
She says that, but I'm sure that it looks like photorealistic already.
Oh, I don't think so. Definitely not yet, but we will get there. Hopefully within the time allotted.
Clock's ticking. You have about an hour left.
Okay, panic time.
I love to stress Melissa out.
So glad.
You can always add in other colors or exaggerate the colors if you want when you're painting. That's definitely something I do. Um, sometimes though, it's because I feel like photos don't always capture just how interesting something looks, and so I want to just push it more and imagine what it would have been like to actually be there.
That's true.
And sometimes it's just because I love lots of color.
That's also true.
No other reason, and no other reason is needed.
I mean, I think anybody that's tried to capture a sunset with their phone
Yeah,
understands that sometimes the camera just can't capture color the way you see it in real life. So,
that's a great example because I do that all the time out here, like on the beach and stuff. So gorgeous out, and then I take a bunch of photos, and they all just look so sad.
yeah, they look terrible, and you're like, "What happened?"
Yeah, this is not what I saw. Why do I have 20 pictures of this on my phone now?
Yep.
So it's always good if you could, not do what we're doing here, but paint things or places that you've actually seen yourself, because then it makes it easier to fill in some of that,
Yep, that's true too.
but not always possible.
Take your own photos and take lots of them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Carry around a little sketchbook if you really get into it, because you can always make little notes. You look at your photo and see that didn't come out quite right.
Mhm.
Can make some notes about what it needs. Or sometimes I have some photo editing apps on my phone, and if I take a picture of something and I really want to try to capture it, a lot of times you can put some different filters on it or play with the saturation and value and stuff, and kind of while you're right there looking at the real thing, get it a little closer.
Mhm. Just trying to put some of this bright green in here.
Me too. It's fun.
hmm I added a little bit more yellow to mine than what I see in the reference, and that's just to get it to feel much more bright than the blue.
Yeah. I did the same thing because it's all about the relationships of color. It's not necessarily about matching the exact colors, but getting the brightness of one to kind of match, the darkness or the whatever is next to it.
One thing about painting water is a lot of those reflections you will pull down with your brush so you can create this vertical stroke. But then if you go back on top with some smaller horizontal strokes, it will look like waves on the surface
Yeah.
of water. If
Or
anybody's
you could do the exact opposite like I did.
or you can do whatever you want.
I did horizontal strokes first, and then I will go back and use my knife to pull up the vertical streaks. So
hmm
this is the beauty of this class, I think.
hmm Same idea, just opposite order, I guess.
That totally checks out for us.
Yep. Paul was talking about painting that bridge, and I do think it's a good idea to kind of paint that in last so that any of the lights on that bridge would go on top of anything else that you've established underneath it, because I just think it will pop a lot more if you put that in at the end.
So we're on the same page there. That's something.
Yeah. And I think you can establish the direction of the water and the reflections if you paint those first.
Mm-hmm. If you're trying out the palette knife thing, I definitely would suggest, and if you're using oil especially, but really any medium, it makes such a difference having that coat of wet paint on there first. As my knife is going across, it just kind of glides and the colors mix so nicely. And if you're fighting against a dry, you know, canvas, it's a totally different experience.
So one thing I haven't painted is that mountain on the far right, and that's because it goes a little bit warmer than everything else
Mm-hmm.
in the painting, and that's because of the way the light is reflecting on the side of that mountain. So I am going to mix a little bit of my lighter blue color with a little bit of my earth tone. So I have like an off-white color. I think it's like an ivory color, and then I have a burnt sienna.
Mm-hmm.
Mix a little bit of those. And it's funny because on your palette, it will look very gray and maybe kind of green. And then once you put it next to those blues, it'll feel very warm.
Yeah, that's always like you can mix a color and you'll think, oh, this is perfect, and then you put it down and it looks totally different.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so definitely test it out next to the colors that you're gonna put it next to.
Yeah.
It will feel totally different in a different setting.
Kind of like ingredients in a recipe on their own. They taste one way, but then you mix them with stuff and you get something
Yeah.
really different.
Yeah. And I mean that goes back to the way light is reflected and the way color works, and
Mm-hmm.
you just have to. It's like when you go to the hardware store and you pick out a color and it looks one way in the store, and then you bring it home and it looks completely different in your room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Everything's relative with color. The way we see it is just all dependent on what's around it.
Sometimes in order to get an effect that I want in the sky, I have to just paint right into something that overlaps it. So you see me right now, just kind of painting right into this mountain. That's okay, because I can go back and carve out the mountain again later. I prefer that to trying to be too careful and always have to like paint around the edges of things. So I just pull the paint right into it.
Okay, got my base coat on everything. Now I can go back and refine some things.
Oh, you can skip that. It looks perfect.
Oh, please. How are we doing on time? Nearly an
We
hour?
have about yeah, about an hour. We're doing good.
We are. We're doing good. We're
Good
on
job.
track. We're focused.
I know. Gosh, what got into us?
I don't know what happened.
So unlike us.
Yes. So I'm just going into my sky with a little bit of that lighter green. Just kind of defining some of those shapes that I see. It's almost like a ribbon curled on top of itself. It's really interesting the way the light works.
Is. There's like it has a lot of depth to it. Just that the streaks of light, you can tell how they're
Yep.
moving through space.
Mm-hmm.
Really interesting.
It's a little white in there too, just to make it pop out from the background. Especially in those areas where you can see it's the brightest.
I just love dragging the paint through other paint. Dragging
Paint through other paint.
paint through other paint. It's so fun. You don't know exactly what's going to happen.
I know you love that, but
Melissa prefers to know what's going to happen.
yeah, some of us like to have a little more control.
I am fine with chaos.
I'm just adding some of that more yellow green in here, and then as I'm going, I'm blending it a little bit with my lighter turquoise color to just kind of drag that light upward. It helps me blend it, especially since I kind of established that lighter aqua color underneath. Let's me blend it.
When I painted more realistically, one of the things that I always kind of hated about it was like having to wait for paint to dry in order to be able to like go and do another section or to add more details to an area or something. Um, so my impatience might have been one of the things that led me to discovering this style because it's actually better if you just keep going into it while it's wet if you're painting this way.
Yeah, that's why I don't usually paint with oil in these classes because I have to wait for it to dry, and we would be here for days.
Yeah, your process is like a lot of layering, and each layer has to be dry before you can go back. Huh?
Mm-hmm.
I just put another thick layer right on top and then drag it through, and you get it kind of mingles with what's there. That's okay. I mean, but I do also, sometimes let areas dry and go back into them too. I mean, get some cool effects that way as well. Get the texture. All right. Well, shockingly, I need to get a little more paint out.
Actually, do as well.
I'm doing a show next year, actually a year from this month, and it's called Stargazing. So
Oh,
I
really?
thought this would be a perfect painting to do for that.
Yeah.
So I'm going to finish this painting today of the landscape, but then I'll probably let that dry and then go back on top of it and add in other stuff because my personal painting style is very weird and layered, and there might end up being a figure on top of it or who knows what.
Hmm. Well, that's cool. That worked out.
I know.
You picked the right
I think
subject,
for
I
our
guess.
classes next year, we should just pick all things that I can use for my show. We're gonna paint a lot
Well,
of stars.
you'll be ready to go.
Yes. But I did think it would be good for people to get to see like how I approach a bigger canvas like this.
Hmm. As I'm painting the lighter areas of the sky, I'm also adding some more dark, just so I can get those to stand out well. And then, like I was saying, acrylic is very transparent, the first layer you put, so I'm just kind of adding some more just so I can get some of the depth that I want from that sky.
Interestingly, I feel like it with both of our pieces, it's all about the layering. It's just very different ways of getting there.
Right. If you don't feel like the acrylic is blending well enough for you, and just keep using your brush strokes, keep blending it together, and then you can always add some more wet paint or get your brush a little bit wet. See if that helps.
Or you could just switch to oil, then you won't have to worry about it.
Or switch to oil and have a much easier time blending. Yes.
You can do oil on top of acrylic. I do that quite a bit. I'll do a base coat in acrylic and then go on top with oil.
Oh, okay. I know there's a certain way you can do it. I think you can layer one over the other, but not the other one over that
Yeah.
one. There was always a
Yes.
rule is
You can't do acrylic on top of oil, but you can do oil on top of acrylic.
okay. That's good to know.
And sometimes I like that because with acrylic, acrylic is cheaper. If I'm doing a giant canvas, I can just get something on there to. Because I just like having paint and texture on the surface, and it doesn't matter what it is.
Hmm. You do have those fast drying oils too. I know I've used those a few times.
The water based ones.
Yeah, they have the water based ones, and then there's the alkyds.
Okay. What do you use to? than that? Is that
Those, I think you use the same medium that you use for oil paint,
okay? I've never
but
used those before. Do you like them?
they're okay. Yeah, it's kind of like a middle of the road type
Mm-hmm.
of approach. Like you get a little bit of the oil experience and a little bit of the acrylic experience,
Yeah,
a little bit of both.
it's interesting. I've tried the water-based ones before, and I was not a big fan of that.
Yeah, it's definitely you definitely have to get used to it. I think it's a different feel.
It is
That's
probably a lot like healthier though.
probably yes. It doesn't feel like an oil paint though.
Yeah,
It's something altogether different.
which is okay if you can make that
Yeah.
work, maybe.
Hmm.
My sky's turning very much into like a Van Gogh Starry Night situation.
Oh yeah, I could see that.
Without the stars, yeah. But we'll get
Yeah.
there. This is fun. It feels like we're back in college doing homework together. Doesn't it? Like we had an assignment to paint the Northern Lights, and we're just hanging out after school painting it together.
Yep. Pretty much.
It's always fun hanging out and making art with other people.
Hmm.
Makes a big difference, I think. We
Yeah.
have quite a few different ways that you can do that with us, with Art Makes Us, in different Zoom classes that we offer. We have a lot of video classes now too that are great because you can just watch them whenever you want and it's convenient. But then when you feel like you want a little bit more interaction, you can come join one of our live classes and get to hang out and chat with us and with other artists.
Hmm. Yep. That's always fun.
Mhm.
I think it's always nice to learn from other artists and see what they're doing and
Oh yeah, I think
what
that's one
they're
of the
doing.
biggest benefits.
Everybody has their own way of going about things,
Yep.
as Paul and I are showing right now, I guess.
Yeah, you're seeing two different ways, but if you were in a Zoom class and there were 15 different artists, you'd be seeing 15 different ways. It's just no two artists are the same.
Right.
So for me, blending, because there's a lot of blending in the sky where it kind of goes from darker at the top to lighter. I'm not trying to get a smooth blend, but I can create, a feeling of it blending by just kind of continually shifting, going darker as I go up, and then dragging one color down into the next so they kind of mix together a little bit. Similar to what you would do with a brush, only you'd probably smooth it out more if you were going for that look.
Hmm. Yep. Yeah, I like to put the paint down and then just spread it out with a lot of brush strokes in different directions just so I can get a smooth application of it. And I'll go back and blend it into another color
Mm-hmm.
same way. Yeah, I'm going to spend most of my time today focused on these, the sky and capturing the northern lights. And then if I do have time, we'll see.
Yeah,
I'll go into the mountains and stuff.
you'll have time. I have faith.
Right. Okay.
lighting in general, I feel like one of the most powerful ways to control the mood and the feeling of a painting. If you understand how to work with lighting, you can really create interesting pieces just by it could be the same exact image but lit a different way. It would evoke totally different emotions.
Hmm.
That would be a fun thing to do in a class sometime. Like paint the
Hmm.
same thing but light it differently and show how to kind of manipulate that.
Hmm. I think we have a class coming up on how to create mood through color and subject matter and lighting and
Well, that would be
good thing.
perfect then.
Yeah, I think you just planned it out.
Okay, nice. Look at us multitasking.
Yep, we're way ahead.
Once you start thinking about that more in your visual art, you're going to notice how other people use that too. And it's everywhere. It's in movies. You know, the lighting, it plays such a big role in creating the mood of a scene, in
Hmm.
photography, everything.
Yep. Yeah, I think Paul and I did a class in the past. I think it was based on composition and layout, and we showed a lot of different scenes from movies and how directors will use certain layouts to evoke a certain mood.
Mm-hmm.
I think once we told everybody about that, everybody started seeing it everywhere.
Yes. That's the thing. Once you start like learning this stuff, you can't turn it off.
Yeah.
So you're gonna be dissecting everything you see.
Hmm. Yep, you're stuck with it. Sorry.
Yeah, but it's a good thing. I think it makes you appreciate how much thought really goes into the things that we, consume every day and might not realize.
Right. Might just take for granted.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right. I'm feeling good about my sky, so I'm going to move back down to the mountains and the water now and start getting some more texture on there. And once again, need more paint.
Of course.
Okay. And I just kind of scooch everything off to the side on my palette and keep using the same sheet. My palette ends up looking like a hot mess. I bet yours is so like neat and organized, isn't
Pretty much.
it? Oh yes.
But I'm using the one with the little like circular wells, so it's a little easier to stay organized.
Oh yes. Okay, more white.
I'm still working on the sky here, just making sure I have some really rich darks to layer those lighter lights into the bright greens and things, just to make sure that those really pop out.
All right, it's mountain time for me.
Yay, mountains.
I'm gonna start with these real distant ones back here. I always kind of when I do landscapes, I like to start with what looks like it's the farthest away. So usually the sky, and then work my way down to like the most distant points on the horizon, and then work my way up to the foreground. For me, that just helps me to think about the depth, the space a little more.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that's the right way to do it. That's just the way I've found that works for me.
Yeah, I do think it is helpful just because you're not going to go paint on top of something else. Like you're not going to have to paint around something
Yeah.
that you've already established. It is easier to start in the background.
And from a very practical standpoint, it usually means if you're painting with a brush or something, that you have somewhere down below to rest your hand as you're working
Right.
down.
Mhm. Yep, you're not going to paint yourself into a corner where you end up putting your hand right in the wet paint.
I mean, I still could find a way to do that, I'm sure.
Yeah, it happens for sure.
All right. Let's bring out a little red because I want to start popping in some of those lights that I see. There's little lights on the horizon that are a little warmer than what I have out on my palette now. Mixing some red and yellow and adding some whites. And then I'm going to use a tiny little palette knife to put those in. It's fun. I like to make the anything that's like really bright, like a light or something. I make the paint super thick there.
Yeah, that's a good rule too for making something appear as if it's glowing. Is just make it really thick because it
Mhm.
actually will reflect the light, literally.
Yeah, the little glob of paint will reflect the light. It's kind of cool. You see that even on like master Renaissance paintings where you would never expect it if you'd only seen a picture of the piece in a textbook or something. You see
Mhm.
them in person. I've always been very surprised at how thick some of the paint strokes are.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a common rule that they use a lot. The thick over thin rule.
Yeah. Just going right back into my water now and bringing out a little bit more texture there, layering in some different colors. I've zoomed in on this area on my computer, so I'm actually seeing more, which is good because then I can have more to respond to. And I'm letting it go right into the mountain so I don't get hung up on that. Over here, the light in the water goes right behind the bridge. So I'm just going to drag it right over there.
I'm just kind of pulling that color back and forth just to blend that lighter aqua into the sky.
I always tell when we're getting closer to the end because we start to get quieter
Mhm.
because we're both like trying to finish.
Yep. Well, I'm definitely not going to finish.
Oh, Melissa.
Not even close.
Oh, that's okay.
Be
Well, I
lucky if
mean,
I get this sky.
technically, I'm not either because I'll be doing more to this painting, but I should finish the landscape part. So now you can see I'm doing the vertical parts of the water, the part that Melissa did first. And it works either way. You go right back in. I still do some horizontal ones too. I like to make the water really thick. It's really close to us in the foreground of the piece. And it just if you use really thick paint, it makes it reflective and it also makes it feel like it's moving. I think water is extra fun to paint.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think water is something that's probably very intimidating to people that are
Hmm.
painting. Oh, hi, Mr. Cat, did you walk through my paint?
Yeah, I think if you're feeling intimidated by an area in your painting like that, it's really good to remind yourself that you don't have to resolve it all in one pass. You
Mhm.
can take as many layers as you need to get it working. So kind of just decide what is it that you want to focus on with this layer. You trying to maybe bring out some more of the different value relationships, the light and dark. You want to try to get some of the color right, some of the basic shapes. I mean, there's so many different things you could look for
Mhm.
to do it all at once.
Yeah, I think it helps to break it down into smaller shapes and take it piece by piece.
Yeah,
Water can get very complicated.
right. Because it has reflections, it has shadows, and then also it's this fluid moving thing.
Yeah, it has a surface, but then also has a lot of reflections.
Hmm.
Did you splatter any stars yet, Paul?
Not yet. I'm hoping I get to. Let's see. We still have about 25 minutes. Okay, yes, I will definitely do some star splattering soon.
Okay.
Right now, I'm just getting the water finished. Then I need to do a little bit on the mountains, and the bridge, and then stars. Let's Seems like a lot for 25 minutes, but let's see what we can do.
I know. I think this is a tricky one because there's a lot of blending, there's
Hmm.
a lot of reflections, there's a lot of things to think about
Yeah.
painting.
Okay. I'm gonna do this mountain over here. I love doing mountains with the palette knife because the texture that the knife makes just feels so rough and it's easy to give it the feeling of different ridges and things.
Hmm. Yeah, the palette knife seems made for mountains.
Oh yeah. normally when I'm painting with a brush, I do a lot more color mixing on the palette. When I'm painting with a knife, I'll do some, but then I'll a lot of times just grab a few different colors at once and let them kind of blend on the canvas because I don't necessarily need it to be like a perfect smooth blend. It can be kind of more interesting to have a couple different colors on your knife and just let them kind of blend together as you go. More paint.
Oh
Jeez.
my goodness. Paint
Never have enough.
over What kind of oil paint do you use, Paul? Are you particular about brands or types or
Not
anything?
really. No, I use a mix. I use whatever I can find.
Yeah.
I don't really care.
Do you have specific colors that you like that you're willing to spend more money on, or do you buy the like cheaper colors? Because I know some of the cadmiums can be super expensive.
Yeah. Um, it depends on the painting and the approach that I'm using for the painting. I mean, the one color I know I'm always going to just need a ton of is titanium white. I use
Hmm.
that more than anything. Because I use that to kind of lighten all the colors. But then
Hmm.
um I usually buy the big tubes because that works better. If I'm doing a detailed painting with a brush and I'm not, doing this thick crazy technique, then I
Yeah.
might buy the nicer brand of paint because I
Oh,
want
okay.
it to be more refined and have more control over it. I love Gamblin paints, like they're thicker. I think the
Hmm.
biggest difference between like the expensive and the cheap paint is that there's more filler in the cheap, so it doesn't necessarily
Yeah.
always cover as quickly. It might take a few more layers, but sometimes I actually like that. So, so yeah, it just depends.
Yeah.
Um,
There's less.
I always buy a lot of dioxide purple because I never like the purples that I mix.
Oh yeah, it is really hard to mix a nice purple, I will say. You have to have the right blue and the right red, and
Hmm.
they have to work together.
Yeah, I like ultramarine blue, cerulean blue. Um, Usually, I like to have sort of like at least two versions of each color, like one that's a little warmer and one that's a little cooler. So like a alizarin crimson is the more purpley red, and then I'll have like a cadmium red that's
More
brighter,
orange.
more orangey.
Mhm.
Green, I like sap green, and then I like viridian, which is really bluish.
Mhm. So all the colors.
I like every color. Yeah, I could keep going, but you get the idea. I do like buying a tube of gray not like Payne's gray or like a real dark one, but kind of just like a middle value gray, because it is nice to be able to put that on the palette and just kind of easily neutralize something if I need to. Because I mean,
Oh,
I always go overboard and my colors are always too bright.
I was
Shocking,
gonna
I know.
say. Well, you neutralize things.
Yeah, imagine how bright they are when I start. Like sometimes even I look at my canvases and I'm like, whoa, I can't even look at this. But that's kind of a part of my process. I put everything on there that I want, make it as crazy as I want it to be, and then uh pull back where needed. Some people work the exact opposite though. They start very cautiously and like with more neutrals and then just slowly add in
Hmm.
accents of color. So that works
Yeah,
too.
I would say that's more the direction I go in.
Yeah.
So I'll start with a grayscale drawing usually, and then I'll paint on top of it.
Hmm. I think in both cases you're looking for that nice middle ground of wanting, the colors to show up and work, but in order for color to um to do its job, it's kind of like light and dark. You have to have neutrals around it. If everything is bright, then it doesn't feel bright. It just everything feels the same. It flattens out. So
Right. Hmm. Very true.
everything in a painting is relative.
Yep.
I always think of it as like everything can't be the star. Some things have to be, the backup singers.
Right. True. And you need all of it to make an interesting painting.
Yeah. That was one of the hardest things for me to learn, I think, because I liked to paint everything as if it was the star.
Yeah, you want it all to be important, right?
Yeah. I mean, at the time you're painting it, it is, but you sort of learn how to temper that and still make it, important and fun to paint, but maybe not like screaming for attention.
Yeah.
Okay, I think I'm good with the mountain, so I'm gonna do little bridge work. And then time for stars.
Yay.
Excited. All right, so
Mhm.
we have 15 minutes. Let's see what I can do.
My goodness. Okay, well, I'm still trying to blend the sky.
You do what you've got to do there, Melissa.
I'm doing my thing.
That's the whole point. They get to see two very different approaches.
Yeah.
One from a person who has no patience, and
Right.
one from like the most patient person on earth.
True.
It's kind of hilarious.
Yep. Whenever we're going to design anything, I'm like, well, let me think about it for a while. I was like, all right, I'll just do it.
Yeah, if Melissa takes too long, like when making ads for classes or whatever, um, I'll give her a chance first. But if I see that she's starting to spend a little too long thinking about it and
Yeah.
making Pinterest boards of inspiration and all of that, I'm
You,
like,
you
okay.
gotta have that.
I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna make this and finish it in 5 minutes, and then you can tweak
Yep.
it if you want.
Yep. Usually how it goes.
Yeah. Usually the tweaks are more like a complete like overhaul, but still, it gives
No, that's not true.
it does push us along a little bit.
Yep. Which Paul's all about.
Keep it moving.
Keep it moving. Don't spend too long. Keep going.
That was really interesting when Bryden and I were painting together a couple of weeks ago. My friend and I did a pop-up show, and we had this idea that we would just collaborate on a bunch of paintings in a week, and however many we did, that would be the show. And um, he is like, interestingly, his style is very abstract and experimental, but his approach is more, he likes to take his time and really think about each step and stuff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, not me.
Nope, that's not Paul. That is not the Paul way.
No. So it was very fun. We ended up just setting a timer.
Oh my gosh.
I think that was my idea.
Of course it was. I do not think that was Bryden's idea.
Yeah. So every 15 minutes, we'd each be working on a painting. Every 15 minutes, the timer would go off and we'd just switch.
Oh my gosh. That sounds like the most terrifying game.
Right? Because
It would be
whatever
so
happens, you're just handing over control of your
Oh my god.
to someone who has a completely different approach.
Yeah. Yep.
So to make these straight lines for the reflections of the lights, I just put a little bit of paint on the edge of the knife and then drag it down. If you mess up, you just cover it back up. Everything's so wet, it's so easy to do. I do love the look of that, like, orangish yellow light against all of these blues and greens.
Yeah, that's really cool.
It's a great color scheme. Good job, nature.
Good job, nature. Way to go. I think nature's pretty good at it.
And when it's not, I just help it along.
I'm just kind of using my brush to carve out the shapes of these northern lights. They definitely have almost like a wave or a ripple effect. It's pretty interesting.
One thing that's good to do with reflections after you paint them is to just go through and kind of disrupt them a little bit. So I'm just taking the dark, and now I'm just going over it in areas so it doesn't feel too liney.
Too liney. I'm just gonna get lighter and lighter with these northern light colors. I'm just gonna layer them on top to give it some depth.
I am about ready for stars.
I'm gonna paint stars too, just for fun.
Good. We have to end with the stars. That's just necessary. Okay. Oh wait, before I do that, I'm gonna just go back and use a little bit lighter color to make the lights on the bridge stand out a little more. So a little more white and just kind of pile it right on top. Real thick. Have to keep kind of cleaning your knife and grabbing more paint if you're doing this because it'll pick up a little of what's there, muddy it up a bit.
Add some of this to my water.
I am loving this. This is so fun.
Are you painting stars?
No, almost. I'm doing
Oh,
little
okay.
spots of light on the bridge still.
I'll paint them when you paint them. Just let me know.
Okay, give me like 2 minutes. Pretend I'm with Brighton, set a timer.
Yes. That sounds so nerve-wracking. I can't believe you did that to him.
I know when he came out, the plan was that we were going to make 6 paintings together.
Oh my gosh. Wow.
And
And
then
then tell everyone how many you made.
when he showed up, I had 42 canvases waiting for him.
What did he say?
He was like, "Oh my god."
Oh my god. Wow.
He said
Reconsidering
easy
my
going though. He
choice.
was like, "Well, okay." I said, "Well, we don't have to use all of them," but of course he knew we did.
Yes. He knew what was happening. We all know.
Yeah. When one of my crazy schemes begins, it's like you're in it.
Yep. You're in it. You just have to let go.
Yep. We
Just
should
go
do
with
a
it.
show like that together, Melissa.
Nope.
Oh. All right, I'm ready for stars now.
Okay. Give me 1 minute. Now I'm not ready.
Too bad, time's up.
Oh my goodness.
All right, I'm just kind of clearing off an area on my palette around the white paint so that I won't grab other colors when I go for it because I think both of us are going to splatter paint the stars, which is super fun. There's different ways you could do it. You could do it with a toothbrush if you have one and just flick it on. I don't have a toothbrush handy, so I'm just going to use my paintbrushes and splatter with those.
Yeah. If you just kind of hit one paintbrush against another, against the handle of another, get a nice splatter. I end up getting it all over my computer and all over everything in front of me, so just be careful if you're
Yeah,
doing it.
makes it really fun.
Yeah.
You have to really thin the paint down so it'll fly off the brush easily.
Yeah, if you're using acrylic, put lots of water in it. You might want to test it on something else first.
I always use the second brush like this and kind of beat it against that.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of stars in this.
There are, yeah. You don't really notice them at first, and you're like, oh, yeah.
If you get one that doesn't look right, or if it's streaks or something, you can just paint over it.
I'm just going to use a brush like this. Might use my flat one again, actually.
It's so fun.
Yep. I'm gonna move my iPad so I don't end up with stars on my iPad. Oh my gosh, they're gonna be all over my glasses.
I know there's a little bit of like backfire, huh?
Yes, yes, there's some ricochet.
I ended up with some stars in my mountain, so now I've got to go back and
Yep, me
get
too.
rid of those. It's an easy fix, though. It's well worth it. If your painting is dry, you could always mask off the areas where you don't want stars, or
Yep.
just like lay paper towels over it, or just anything to keep the paint from going there. But my painting was too wet for that, so I just have to backtrack and get rid of the stars I don't want.
I haven't painted that part yet, so it actually works out.
Oh, there you go.
Mhm.
See, there's some advantages to taking your time, huh?
Right. It does help to create depth if you're painting anything in the foreground to add some sharper lines and more details.
Yeah.
So if I were going to go paint this mountain, I would definitely add more detail than I did in the background. Some more contrast, probably.
You definitely want to use the or think about depth and space when you're painting a landscape like this. And when you're painting something that's far away, the details will be so much more obscured. Just more of like an impression. And then up close, you can get as crazy and detailed as you want. And we know that means Melissa is in it.
I will be loving it. I will be lost in details.
Oh, yes. We are just about out of time here. Are you about to a good stopping point with yours?
Um, I mean, no, but that's okay.
We could just pretend.
Well, we'll pretend it's done. Pretend it looks good.
Oh, I'm sure it looks good. There's no doubt about that.
Parts of it look okay, but
Yeah, that sounds like Melissa, and I'm sure it's like a masterpiece.
no, it's definitely a work in progress, but it's getting there.
Cool.
Just okay.
Right. Well,
So wherever you're at, it's okay.
yes. Time to stop.
I think it's about time. I think time to call it.
Okay. Well, that was our painting. Here you can see Melissa's and mine and how different they are. I know that Melissa's video cut out sadly about halfway through or even a little before halfway, so you didn't get to see all of her process. I apologize for that. You got a little extra Paul, a little less Melissa. I guess she's used to that.
I'm totally okay with that.
But however you choose to paint, I hope that you really enjoyed this video, this class, and that you'll come back and paint with us again soon.
No, thanks for joining us. It's great to have everybody joining in on all of these classes, and we love that you're a part of Art Makes Us.
Yes, thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.